She said it was a networking event, but I was on the guest list too. She told me it was just a boring networking night. But you wouldn't be interested, she said with a shrug, slipping on her earrings in the mirror. It's just people talking shop. I nodded, pretending to buy it. But here's the thing, I know when she's lying. The way her voice softens a little too much. The way she doesn't meet my eyes for long. And most of all, the way she suddenly becomes overly nice. That night, she had been humming all day. Humming. As if her conscience was trying to drown out something. I didn't confront her. Instead, I texted a friend I hadn't seen in a while, a guy who worked with event venues across the city. Told him I was curious about any major networking mixers happening that evening. A few minutes later, he sent me a flyer. A Tech Creators Connect event. Hosted at a hotel downtown. And right there, at the bottom of the invite, it said guest speaker, Donald. Yeah. Me. You see, I'd done a few tech consulting gigs for one of the event sponsors last year. Apparently, they'd reused my name without telling me, thinking I wouldn't mind. My friend offered to fast-track me through the guest list and even joked, you can crash your own stage time. So, I suited up. Not because I wanted to catch her in the act, but because I needed to know what exactly she thought she was hiding from me. When I walked in through the side entrance, the buzz of conversation, laughter, and clinking glasses hit me like a wave. Everyone was dressed sharp, business cards in hand, and champagne flutes were floating from tray to tray. I didn't have to search long. She stood near the back of the room, her hand on another man's arm. Laughing. Not that polite chuckle she uses around strangers. No, this was that deep laugh, the one that meant she felt comfortable. Intimate. I didn't storm over. I didn't call her name. I just kept walking, silent, unnoticed. My friend found me near the refreshments table and whispered, "You're on in 5. Want to say a few words?" I nodded. 5 minutes later, I stood under the soft lights on the stage, looking out at the same people she said I'd have no interest in meeting. And there she was. Front row now, frozen, eyes wide, her smile gone in a blink. I smiled. "Good evening," I began. "Some of you know me as a systems consultant, others as someone who helps companies figure out where the real problems are hiding." There were some chuckles. I let it hang. Tonight, I was told this would be a place for connection, honesty, and transparency. So let's talk about what happens when people pretend to be one thing, but behind the scenes, they're living a very different story. Her jaw tightened. She knew. I didn't need to say her name. I didn't need to call her out. Because the best revenge is letting someone reveal themselves. I paused on stage just long enough for the silence to settle. Not awkward, controlled. I looked out over the crowd, scanning faces, pretending like I was addressing everyone when in reality, every word was aimed straight at her. In business, I continued, we value transparency. We expect our partners to be upfront, honest, dependable. But what happens when the lies don't show up in contracts or spreadsheets? What happens when the real betrayal is personal? I could see her shifting uncomfortably, her drink untouched now, eyes darting to the man beside her who, judging by the look on his face, had absolutely no idea what was going on. Good. I wanted him to feel confused. I wanted her to feel exposed. I kept my tone calm, steady. I've worked with systems that hide errors under polished code, problems buried so deep even the most experienced eyes might miss them. But eventually, the truth bubbles up. Because the one thing code and people have in common is this, they always leave traces. I let that hang in the air as murmurs rippled through the audience. A few people nodded, probably thinking I was speaking metaphorically. But some caught on. Her, most of all. I could see it in her face, that tight-lipped expression, her hand now clutching her purse like it might shield her. I wrapped up my talk without ever naming her. Without ever acknowledging the real reason I was there. That was the point. I stepped down from the stage to a light round of applause, handed the mic back to the organizer, and made my way to the back of the room. I could feel eyes following me, whispers beginning to circulate. A few people came up to shake my hand, thank me for the speech. One woman even said, that was powerful. Felt personal. I smiled. It was. I didn't go straight to her. I waited. Let her sweat a little. I watched her try to pretend like everything was fine, like she wasn't just humiliated in front of a room full of strangers. She laughed a little louder now, leaned in closer to the guy beside her. Overcorrecting. Desperate to maintain control. But she kept looking over her shoulder. She knew I hadn't left. That I was still in the room. Watching. Eventually, she broke. She excused herself from her colleague and headed toward the exit. I moved before she saw me, taking a shortcut through the hallway that led to the lobby. I was waiting there when she pushed through the doors, code in hand, phone already at her ear. Going somewhere? I asked, stepping out of the shadows. She froze. Her face twisted into a mix of guilt and panic. Donald, what are you doing here? I tilted my head. Networking. Isn't that what this is? She swallowed hard. You're not even part of this event. I pulled out the flyer from my inside jacket pocket, the one with my name still listed as a guest speaker. I handed it to her. Apparently, I am. She didn't even look at it. She didn't have to. She knew she'd been caught. Knew there was no way to twist this into something innocent. Still, she tried. He's just a friend from work, she said quickly, voice low like she was trying not to draw attention. I raised an eyebrow. The kind of friend you laugh with like that? Touch his arm like that? Dress like this for? She opened her mouth. Closed it again. No words came out. I didn't raise my voice. Didn't accuse. That wasn't the plan. I wanted the silence to say more than my words ever could. I looked at her for a moment, then took a step closer, not threatening, but final. You lied, I said softly. And the worst part? You thought I wouldn't find out. Her lip quivered, just for a second. Donald, No, I cut her off. You said it yourself. I wouldn't be interested in this event. Turns out it was the most revealing night of my life. I turned and walked away, leaving her standing there, flyer in hand, mouth half open, and no more stories left to spin. I didn't need to shout. I didn't need revenge served hot. Sometimes the coldest exposure is enough to freeze someone where they stand. The walk back to my car felt strangely calm. No racing heart. No shaking hands. Just a quiet, steady focus, like my mind had finally stopped spinning after weeks of second-guessing. The lies, the excuses, the subtle shifts in her behavior, all of it finally aligned like pieces of a puzzle falling into place. I didn't feel vindicated. I didn't feel triumphant. I felt empty. Like I'd reached the end of a story I never wanted to start. That night wasn't just about catching her. It was about confirming what I already knew in my gut but hadn't wanted to admit. Sometimes we hold onto people not because we still love them, but because we're afraid of what it means to let go. I sat behind the wheel for a while, watching people exit the hotel, some laughing, some already glued to their phones, none of them aware of the quiet detonation that had just occurred in the lobby. I watched until she finally came out, alone, her coat wrapped tightly around her, head down like the cold had finally caught up to her too. She didn't look around for me. She didn't even pull out her phone. She just walked to her car and sat there, hands on the steering wheel, unmoving. That's when it hit me, she had no backup plan. For all the secrecy and manipulation, she never thought past the moment of getting caught. She had built her story on the belief that I would never show up. And now that she had nothing. I didn't drive off right away. I watched her for a moment longer, part of me expecting her to come over, to knock on my window, to try and explain. But she didn't. Maybe she knew there was nothing left to say. Or maybe she was just hoping I'd go away and take the guilt with me. Either way, I started the car and left without looking back. The next morning, the silence between us was louder than any argument could have been. She didn't sleep in our room. I heard the guest room door close sometime after midnight. I didn't bother asking where she'd been. And she didn't offer. At breakfast, we moved around the kitchen like strangers in someone else's house, her pouring coffee, me grabbing cereal, no words exchanged. When she finally spoke, it wasn't an apology. Are you going to leave? She asked, not looking up from her mug. I didn't answer right away. I studied her face. There was no fight in it anymore. Just weariness. Like the weight of everything she'd been hiding had finally sunk in. I leaned back in my chair, took a deep breath. I don't know, I said honestly. But I'm not going to stay in a house where I have to question everything you say. She looked down. It didn't mean anything. I almost laughed. That tired, hollow excuse. The universal phrase for people who didn't want to take full responsibility. Then why lie about it? I asked. Why not just say, hey, I'm going out with someone who flirts with me and makes me feel something you don't anymore? At least that would have been honest. She didn't answer. The truth is, I had already started packing things in my head the night before. Not clothes or furniture, but expectations. Hopes. All the little pictures I'd built about the future. I wasn't angry anymore. I was just done. Done pretending we could salvage something when one of us had already jumped ship without telling the other. I spent the day out. Took a long walk, cleared my head. I even sat in a coffee shop and started making a list, not of pros and cons, but of what I wanted from the next chapter of my life. Things like honesty, stability, peace, and love, yes, but not the fragile kind that shatters the moment you look away. That evening, I came home to find her sitting on the couch, suitcase beside her, eyes red. She stood up when I entered, like she'd been rehearsing what to say. I'm going to stay with my sister for a while, she said. Give you space. I nodded. It was the first smart thing she'd said in weeks. She paused at the door, looked back like she was hoping I'd say something. Ask her to stay. I didn't. And she didn't push. She left quietly, no drama, no final goodbye. Just the sound of the door closing, soft, but final. I stood there for a moment, staring at the empty space she left behind. And then I did something I hadn't done in months. I exhaled. The days that followed were eerily still. The house no longer echoed with half-hearted conversations or tension thick enough to slice through. Just silence. Peaceful but unfamiliar. For a while, I didn't know what to do with it. I'd gotten so used to living in a state of quiet suspicion, constantly decoding glances and second-guessing explanations, that actual quiet felt unnatural. But slowly, it started to feel like healing. I stopped waiting for the sound of her keys in the door. I stopped checking my phone for messages that never came. I just let it be. Let her absence carve out space for me to finally breathe again. I got back to work with a sharper mind, started running in the mornings again, and even reconnected with a few old friends I hadn't seen in ages. Turns out when you stop wasting energy trying to hold together something broken, you have a lot more to give to yourself. One afternoon, I got a call from the organizer of that networking event. He thanked me again for stepping in to speak and said the clip of my speech had gone semi-viral on a local business forum. "You should consider doing more of these," he said. "There was something raw in your delivery." It landed. I chuckled, telling him I hadn't planned on making a career out of public heartbreak. But that conversation stuck with me. Because it reminded me I hadn't just exposed her. I had exposed myself to a room full of strangers. And instead of breaking me, it set me free. That moment on stage had been more than a confrontation. It was a reclamation. Of my voice. Of my worth. About a week later, she reached out. A short message. "Can we talk?" I stared at it for a while, thumb hovering over the screen. I wasn't angry anymore. But I wasn't open either. I didn't owe her closure. She had already seen what that looked like, me standing under the lights, telling a truth that didn't need names to sting. I didn't reply. I didn't delete the message either. I just moved on. The truth is, some endings don't need a final conversation. Some chapters end with silence, and that's enough. In the weeks that followed, life didn't magically transform into some fairy tale. But it became real again. I started volunteering for local panels, speaking at small tech meetups, using my story sanitized and stripped of names as a cautionary tale about trust and intuition. And people listened. Some came up after and thanked me for it, saying what they'd always felt but couldn't put into words. It didn't make the betrayal go away, but it made it worth something. Gave it weight beyond pain. Gave me purpose. One night, months later, I walked past the hotel where it all happened. Same glowing sign, same valet stand. But this time, it didn't sting. I didn't see ghosts in the doorway or feel the weight of that confrontation. I just walked by, knowing I'd been through fire and walked out whole. That night had changed everything, but not in the way she thought. She thought her secret would shatter me. Instead, it sharpened me, revealed what I was willing to tolerate and what I would never accept again. So, if you've ever been lied to, gaslight, made to feel like you were crazy for asking questions, know this: your gut is smarter than you think. The truth always finds light. And when it does, you don't need to scream. Just stand up, speak clearly, and let your silence do the rest. If this story hit home or you've been through something similar, hit that subscribe button, drop a comment below, and share your story. You never know who needs to hear that they're not alone.